Today we're going to talk about discernment. This is a tricky term because some people, they have this play of words. They think, well, discernment is something that I practice because I'm not judgmental. I only discern. And it's kind of funny because if you listen carefully, these kinds of folks will say, I'm not judgmental. I'm just discerning that I don't like you. I'm just discerning that you're a jerk, and yet clearly it's a judgment. So it gets really, really tricky. The idea, discernment versus judgment, and what place does discernment have in our lives? So let's take a look at that. And one thing I want to share before we kind of launch into the questions, specific questions, is that, discernment is, I'm going to give you some tangible tools for discernment, but, there's people that will love a teaching, love a teacher, love a philosophy or whatever, and then fall out of love with it. And they might say, well, this is not good. I liked it, but it's not evolved enough, or it's not, they'll find something they don't like about it. So one thing I want to share though is discernment can be done without judgment. You can discern that, this certain thing isn't your style, certain diet isn't your thing. And that's fine. It's just not your thing. But it's like saying, look, this isn't my thing. Instead of saying that's wrong, my discernment, or the rules of nature say this, or politics say this, facts, science, and we try to back these things. We have to have some sort of proof that something is or isn't good or healthy or whatever. If you're going to say that you're not judgmental about these things, then really one way to discern that is whether you're speaking about yourself. No, I'm good. That doesn't work for me. Or I really like this particular thing. Instead of, you've got to do this. This is the highest. This is the best. And so on. And it gets very tricky because, for example, joining with God, communion with God is better than day-to-day philosophy, intellectual philosophies of life. So in a sense, we still can say something is more advanced. But even then, if for somebody else, let's say that it's true that something you're studying or something you're doing is really, really more powerful in its effect, its vibration, and so on, and you say to somebody, this is more evolved than the thing you're studying, that may be true, even measurable vibrationally. But where compassion comes in is that you say, wow, you know what? It didn't occur to me. This may not be the highest for you or at this time. See, I don't have to say, I guess you just don't get it. You're not evolved enough to study this. That's judgment again. And it means you're not even likely getting the thing you're studying, if you're going to throw out lines like that. So it does get a little bit tricky. There are things that seem to be higher in frequency, higher in vibration, supposedly even measurably so. What consciousness is higher than God's? I could say God's consciousness is obviously the highest consciousness of all. And you could say, no, I think that Socrates is wiser than God. That could be your opinion. And for you, that would be right. No sense in arguing with people. And I'm not dissing Socrates. I'm just using a made-up example. So, there are things that we can say this is or isn't, but it's really just opinions. On Earth, we have opinions. And opinions, in a sense, are different than facts, which are different than truth. What's really nice is when the facts align with the truth and our opinions, all of these things. When they're all aligned, that's pretty cool. But when opinions differ from the facts, it gets really conflicting for some people. And when that's different than lowercase t, truth, that gets even more challenging. Worst of all is when none of these things resonate with the highest truth, the capital T of God. So for me personally, I like to stay in alignment as much as possible. I try to allow the truth of God to reflect into the truth of Michael, meaning my way of expressing the truth of God. But if my way of expressing it starts to differ so much that the truth of God, capital T, doesn't even have a T in it anymore, even though it shifts to a lowercase t, meaning from the capital T, the all, God consciousness, lowercase t, which means it drops down into the material world, the 4 points of a cross, the T, the material world. So it's still the truth, but it's from a material human perspective. I'm good with that because it still reflects the truth of God. I typically am not going to get into conversations with people on opinions. Try to stay out of opinions. There's a discernment you can use. I'm discerning that it's not going to be the greater good for me to engage with these opinions. And somebody's out there that's going to say, mine's not an opinion, mine's a fact. It's a fact. Science has proven that Democrats are better than Republicans or vice versa. It's a fact. And they throw these things out there. The more they try to use so-called facts, usually the more disconnected from the truth that they are, and they have to then compensate with facts. Facts that can be manipulated into looking a certain way and supporting opinions. And the opinions are still removed from the lowercase t truth of, truth that might be there in our consciousness, which, then is still removed from the truth of God. So opinions are really usually far away from the truth of God. I'm suggesting that we all learn to say, how do I stay in the light of that capital T truth? I'm going to stand in the truth of God, let it become the truth as I understand it. I'm okay to say it, it shifts into a material interpretation in my life here, so my truth. And then now I would like to see my feelings, my opinions, and the facts line up with that. When the facts and opinions shift out of alignment with truth, you have a problem. And that's when it's time to say, wait a second, something's not feeling quite right. And that's a good thing to discern. See, if you don't know how to discern that, oops, something's shifted out. I'm just discerning that I don't feel quite aligned. That's okay. That's healthy, in my opinion. That's healthy. So we shift out, we say, oops, something's not feeling right. Discerning from your feeling is a great way to say, I get it, something's kind of off. Even if I'm not factually able to support it in some way, saying it's a fact that something's out of alignment, doesn't matter. I allow truth, and then lowercase t truth, and then even my sense of feeling to say, in my opinion, something's shifting off here. And the facts may not support it, but it's not the hierarchy. It's not the highest, voice for me. Truth is, lowercase truth second. My opinions align with that truth last, third, and then last, facts. Most people will actually live by facts alone. And that's okay. That's okay. That's where they're at. It's just not for me. So the ego is going to try to create its own version of facts. And that's why some of us have had relationships with people who verbally, mentally, just like bull in a china shop, they just force themselves in, with, no, you don't get it. Here's the truth. This is the fact. You don't get it. This science has proven. You can tell if you listen. It sounds like they're intensely confident, but in fact, they're becoming more and more intensely not so confident, which is why they have to get louder and use facts. It's very sad if you think about it. We don't feel sad about them at the time because they just act like, control freaks or jerks. But when you sit separate from the incident, if you can get yourself out of that, look at it from a bigger standpoint, you realize, wow, when I really think about it, this person's insecure. And they're trying to use facts, which are almost like fake little puppets, because they don't know how to connect with the light of God, the real relationship of God and you, and so on. So they're segmented from that. So they have to create little false relationships with things called facts, and say, look, this proves this. And that never ends. People will argue. That's why politics and things, it just doesn't end. Because people are not shifting back into, wait a minute, what about God? I always admire people in high positions like politicians and so forth, the few that do their best to actually step aside, set aside self, and listen to God, I just admire that, because they're in a world that does so little of that. It's been designed or twisted to be designed in a way that doesn't allow God. Technically, all things can receive God's guidance in them, but politics is one that has, progressively edged God out and created its own little system. And it's a great system, not great in a good way, great meaning perfect for dysfunctional consciousness, perfect for argumentativeness, and never coming up with solutions. Every solution has almost the same amount of oppositional arguments, and there's never peace. Wow, it's like, how could that be? I mean, it doesn't even make sense to me to create a system like that. I would not be able to do that. I would not be able to have a household where everybody, they call it checks and balances, which is supposed to mean we keep ego in check. That's supposed to be what it means. But instead, we'll keep everything in check. We say yes, there'll be just as many no's. Say no, there'll be just as many yeses. Everything stays in conflict, and that's not God. And you can say, well, let's look at that. Is that an opinion? Yes, one that's aligned with the truth. How do I know that? I know it. You may not agree, so you can say, well, no, I don't see it that way. That's fine. That's where you do your best to get your opinions to line what you see to be the truth. For me, knowing what the truth of God is, which is peace, love, oneness, conflict doesn't align with that. Therefore, I don't see it as something that, is congruent with the way of God. And I do believe there is a way to do that, but I don't believe most people are willing to try, and most systems aren't allowing it because the systems are created by people. So I have some questions here from you folks, and and the last thing I want to share before I go into the specific questions is these truths. When you're asking these questions, you'll understand why I'm doing a prelude to this. It's because people have this almost like everybody's got this, even in spirituality, this ADD attitude. Like they can't keep their attention very long on anything. So they go, hey, what have you been doing lately? Oh, I'm doing great, man. I've been taking care of my health and, doing some yoga and really just enjoying my life, And, oh, yoga. Oh, I did that 20, 30 years ago. Now I'm into, and they've got some new thing they're into. Check with them 5 years from now and they're into something else. And the next thing and the next thing. That's people that follow fads. Whether it's author fads or teacher fads or teaching fads or movie fads, there's something that they're into. Now, if they're doing that and there's a pattern of it at all, chances are they're going to be into something else tomorrow. Proverbial, tomorrow. So that's not really a teaching or a teacher that I would be into following. Yeah, I'm into this guy who changes his mind every other day. So I'm really somewhat proud of the fact that what I know is pretty consistent. And I ask you, try to find a way to be consistent instead of shifting. Oh, today I'm a pagan, but now pagan's gone. That's old. That's silly. Now I'm more evolved. I'm a Buddhist. And then the Buddhist, you walk around acting, pseudo-Buddhist. Most Buddhists are pseudo-Buddhists. I'm not saying ones that are sincerely following the practice. I'm talking about people that claim to be in that lifestyle or consciousness. Most of them are not real, but you now they're into that, and then that shifts to something else, and whatever. It's like it's all just part of the game. It's all an illusion, and it's very sad. But it tells me that's not for me. I'm looking. God is, and because God is consistent, and so for me, one way to know how I'm doing in terms of integrating my spirituality is to know how consistent I am. If I'm hopping around with different belief systems, it's not, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't resonate as real. Now, mind you, I teach on just about every subject under the sun. Honestly, I don't know of teachers that have such a broad spectrum of topics, but underneath it, there's one consistent thing, and that's what I dig. God is. And then I can teach about paganism, and I can teach about evolution, and I can teach about cosmology and astrology and whatever, mysticism, whatever. But under it, God is. And so that's kind of a nice thing to know, that I can teach these things, but nothing changes for me in terms of the core of it all. God is. It's our return to God that really matters most. So I'm not really impressed with people that jump around a lot. I think it's a sense of loyalty, but it's also a sense of groundedness, but it's also a sense of, this works. Why would I change it? And it's always worked. The choice to believe that God is, I am, we are, and so it is. And getting back to that, keeping that as our core, to me, that's fantastic. So for example, you guys, we all have people there. As a teacher, there's people that love me. They love my teachings. And then they hate my teachings. Well, wait, if you ever truly loved me, meaning any of us too, if you ever truly loved my teachings, then you got them. Right? You got it. You couldn't have loved it without getting it. If you really got it, how could you start hating it? See? So when people say, they love us and then all of a sudden they're not in love with us, or even that they dislike us later, what it means is they were never real, because love does not die. It cannot die. Love is a reflection of God, and God cannot die. So when, that, just understand, forgive them, they know not what they do. But it does tell us, in a sense, that's a discernment on relationships and discernment on students when you're a teacher. Be careful not to overly invest in or take on, how much they love and respect. I thank you. When you say that, thank you. It'll only be between you and God to know if that's real or not. You can tell me you like me. You can tell me you like my teachings. I appreciate it. But is it real? Because I only care about it if it's real. You can tell me you like my teachings, but if it's not real, what does that matter to me? I don't care. How am I going to know if it's real? Only you and God know. So I leave it to you. And we all need to do that with others. People, they like you, they don't like you. Stay out of the investment of it. Appreciate it when they seem to like you. Don't lose your mind when they don't seem to like you, but just know it does confirm that they were never real in the first place. They were coming from some momentary agenda or some momentary glitz, some momentary thing that they thought that, a thing that they liked about you or something they thought they'd get from you. But if it changes, it wasn't real, so it's okay. All right, questions, people asking. These are a variety of questions, but they're all under one umbrella, discernment. So briefly, and some of you have posted these on YouTube, some on my Facebook page, and some email. This is about health. Should I use an allopathic physician or use allopathic medicine or holistic medicine? Great question. What if you have a major illness and you try to handle it holistically? Everyone watching this has known at least one person that has done things holistically that didn't work. And everybody watching this has also tried at least one thing allopathically, which means mainstream medicine, that did not work. Yet, talk to either group, and they're all going to say, that thing doesn't work. I know somebody who tried that and it didn't work. They're going to blame each other. What I'm saying is there's a place for all of it. Discernment doesn't mean you have to choose one thing or another. Try to learn to honor everything has its place. And it's all an illusion in this world anyway, but everything has its place while in the illusion. If you said to me, fortunately I've not really been sick much in my life, but let's say I had a full-blown flu. And I don't know that I've ever even had a flu. I've never had the vomiting and stuff people have every so often. Sometimes every flu season they call it. That's really great because then it's a predictable season. Uh-oh, here it comes, and then they get it again. But if I were to have some full-blown flu and it caused what they say, aches or vomiting or whatever it is, I could sit and sip on organic herbal tea. And it's kind of nice to know that what I'm taking in is organic, so that feels kind of cool. But if I'm really hurting and sick, what if I have to, pick up my kids at school if they're little or something, and I got to get to the school to get them. And there's a drug, a medicine, that knocks out the symptoms for a couple of hours. I think I would take that if I were you. Why not? Oh, it's dangerous. It could do this and that. Well, yeah, and a meteor could hit you too. But right now the kids need picked up at school. So go. It's okay. It's like this is what I'm sharing here is the best I can explain to be the truth of God reflected in a human thing. I'm not going to get into arguments about opinions or pseudo facts. I'm just going to say, here's what feels right. But I am sharing it from me. And you might not agree, but be careful not to get too polarized and say right, wrong. Just chill and understand. Allow everything to have its place. Just like I said, about people studying something that might not seem as evolved as something you're studying, that it's good for them now. So learn to be accepting, not enabling, but accepting of where people are at. So I would just say there's a place for it and a time for it. And if you have a relative that's going for surgery and you don't believe in it, the last thing you should be doing is shaming them for having surgery or taking medicine, pills, because they have depression. Well, just get over it. That's actually hurtful and inappropriate. It doesn't join with them. It doesn't honor them. You're wronging them, and then them going on to your version of what's right could actually cause them harm, and then it's on you. So allow, accept. Love is what it is. Someone asked, which is better, vegan diets or, others like the variety of meat eating and vegan and so on. Again, I've personally, until now, experimenting a little, I've never had vegetables in my life, but I also never ate meat. Some people hear that I don't eat meat, they think, oh, he's a vegan or a vegetarian. Others think the opposite when they hear the opposite. I don't really, I've never done either. And that doesn't mean I don't have an opinion or a voice or an idea to share with you. But I will say, again, accepting. It's important to love meat eaters even if you're a vegan. Don't make your veganism a religion and then shame and crucify people for it. It's sick. To do that is actually a sickness. And it's not coming from love. It's not coming from God or the truth of God. So people will do what they do. If you're going to say, no, eating meat is cruel, it's bad, okay, then you just shamed all the Native American cultures throughout history. Nice job. Nice one fell swoop, pure judgment on an entire race of people. Wow, that was pretty good, right? Very evolved. Not really, if you think about it. So be careful. Be careful. Some people, they believe they need to eat that. Some people think they need it for protein. Some people, it's a cultural thing, their foods. I only know this. If, I've said this before somewhere along the line, but if I were crash landed in a desert and it took me days to walk out of that desert, but I saw rabbits or something that I could kill and somehow eat so I could sustain life, I would fast. I don't really have it in me to kill things. And I'm not trying to shame people that eat meats and so forth. I'm just saying I don't have it in me. I still eat one or two types of meats on a very limited basis, and only one or two types. I've never had fowl of any kind. I've never had steak and all these kinds of meats that people eat. Never done it. Not interested in trying. I don't need to be healed from my not eating meat. I'm fine with it. I've had family since I was a kid trying to coerce me. I remember my father trying to pay me. And he would get his friends to gather around at, when we had people over. Watch this, Michael. And he would offer me $10, which to a kid, in 1960 or early 60s, that was a lot of money, man. All of a sudden, he watches. Michael, just take one sliver of this beef and eat it. I'll give you $10. I mean, I didn't go, It was not an option. It wasn't going to happen. His friends would be like, what's wrong with this kid? It wasn't going to happen. So, it didn't work for me, but I still don't condemn people for eating meat. Just because something doesn't work for you doesn't mean you have the right, to judge others for it. So, no meats, but at the same time, same with, the vegetarian stuff. It wasn't vegetables. It just wasn't my thing. So I would only eat these limited few things, and got used to that. Bread, toast, cheese, something simple. And some people love and admire me for that, that's fine. Some people hate me for it. Don't care. It's fine, because that's their trip. If they like me for it, There's something in them that's good, that sees light, it's something they like. That's great. They hate me for it. There's something evil in them, a darkness that they're projecting onto me. That's great. That's their thing. We learn to let people have their thing. Okay? So that's something to consider. When it comes to the foods, I know some of you are going to be hot on the trail with this one, thinking, God, he's going to, condemn one style or another, and it's not me, and I don't do that. Because it's not truth. It really isn't. So I'm fine with what is, and love you all. Whatever, foods and diet you choose, it's fine. But do discern what feels right for you. If you go off meats and you get sick, you might have to consider meats or a supplement for meats. Like I said, I personally wouldn't be the type to want to kill things as little as possible. But that's me and my expression. That doesn't mean I wrong people for it. All right. Hopefully, I've addressed that at least enough for now. Next question. When it comes to topics, teachings, like A Course in Miracles, there's Course in Miracles versus, say, other like motivational teachers, Christ consciousness versus motivational teachers. Everything has its place. There are some very popular motivational speakers. I'm not going to name names, but if I do slip, forgive me. But I don't think I've ever, and I typically don't want to use people's names, because then it becomes an ism that people go after. But there are motivational speakers, and they really spout, how much they make. They have their own planes and their own airports and their own launch pads and their whatever, it's like, oh, I have a swimming pool in my kitchen, I'm so wealthy. It's like, someone's being helped by that. That someone is maybe on a fundamental level. Maybe it's a business person that would hear that rather than hearing me talking about Christ consciousness. So is that as evolved? No. But is it doing as much good, at least for somebody, for where they are in the moment? Yeah, technically you could say that. So that's all right. So I'm not one to myself get all impressed by the high rolling so-called spiritual teachers, but they're really motivational. Just learn the difference of what you call them. They're not spiritual. They probably shouldn't be calling themselves that, and I don't think some of them do. They say what they are. They're motivational teachers or self-help gurus and other terms for it. So that's that. But I don't compare them, and don't see them as similar, other than that they help people, to great spiritual teachings like Christ consciousness, Course in Miracles, and so on. What about the Course versus some other books? There are some books where people said that they're channeling God's messages, God's, input, God's feedback, and so on. Understand that the ones that made it very big, everybody had a copy of, these, and you guys are watching. You don't have to type in there what I'm talking about and expose them. I mean, if you feel there's a need to, whatever, that's fine. But, you don't have to. But there are some books, and we should all know what they are, really. But if we've been around, that it should come to your mind. But, there's books, this is God talking. And it almost never is. It's, there's a guy who said, God talked to me, and here's what God says. But it's really not. It's really my interpretation of God. So it's like, if you come to me and you say, Michael, if you were a rose, what would a rose say? And then I would be sort of channeling the consciousness of a rose. This happens. People do this, shaman do it with plant medicine and so on. You're channeling the consciousness of that thing, or an animal medicine and so on, meaning animal energy, animal symbolism. So I don't mean medicine extracted from an animal, you get it? All right, so, instead the person sits and, God, I wonder what God thinks about this. And they get a real nice epiphany, like, but that doesn't mean it's God, because it isn't most of the time. But I will say, in respect and honor, it's someone's version of God, and that's not too bad. That's better than their version of their ego. So it's better, but it's not what you were sold to believe that it is. So I don't get real impressed with that stuff either, right? Because I know what it is. It's, this person's version of, and that's what maybe that you title it. God as I see it. Okay, that would be more honest, but it wouldn't sell as much. And then people are asking, oh my goodness, the popular channel, one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest channel these days. Um, you know, very big on manifesting and prosperity and stuff, which is in itself tells you maybe it's a sort of a limited consciousness because it's on stuff. But there is someone out there that's a very popular channel, and a lot of you have asked, what about this channeling versus A Course in Miracles? Well, there is no verses really, because A Course in Miracles is the teachings of the Holy Spirit and of Jesus, which are sort of the same but sort of distinctly different. But it's the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Jesus meaning the one that attained Christ consciousness. So if it's Christ / Holy Spirit channeled in A Course in Miracles, and there is no consciousness higher in the universe than God itself, but God's beyond the universe. There's no consciousness higher than these, then why would I even need to answer that question? That's the highest. Now, when these channels say, oh, well, Course in Miracles, it's a wonderful book, but I mean, one of these channels says Course is wonderful, but it's outdated. We, the channel, happen to be higher because we're more recent, which is a great, God, you can't defeat that. The fact that they say because we're newer, we have newer information, you can't argue that because they've made a self-proclamation that sustains themselves. It's perfect for an ego statement. But this is very important. Whether you understand that or not, it's very important because when I'm discerning to listen to a channel, a channeling, a book, a teacher, whatever, anywhere along my way, I'm looking for it to be consistent, the way I talked about a few minutes ago about consistency is important, but I'm also looking to see, does it stay congruent with what I already know to be true? Now, I know God can be trusted, Holy Spirit, Christ, Jesus, that's good. Krishna, I know that there are certain consciousnesses, beings that I can trust, that are aligned with real truth. Now, you can come along, you can dress great, you can talk the talk, you can even manifest stuff materially, like, look at that, I just manifested a gold coin. That's fantastic. But as soon as you are incongruent or out of alignment with what I know to be light of God, I'm done. Because from then on, I'm just tempted to settle. And so I'm not interested, and that's a good discernment for any of us. So I'm not saying you have to dump the teachings of so-and-so because they slip and say these things, but it is cool for you to be able to rise to a level of consciousness to be able to see through those things. So those teachers' teachings, those channels, they don't really do anything for me. Let's say that one of you sent me a meme that had a quote from one, and the meme made sense. That's great. It says something, love is the universal law of all laws. Great. I go, wow, that's true. That's all. I don't diss it just because it came from them. If they happen to get a tidbit of truth that came through, great. But I'm not going to choose to be a follower on any level, major follower, minor follower, when I know that they're also BSing people to a degree. BSing meaning they're claiming that something I know is of God is lesser than them. What would say that other than the ego? That's completely an ego axiom, a proverb of the ego. We're better than God itself. I mean, it's just perfect. So it doesn't interest me. So if you know who I'm talking about and you have interest in it, don't let me tear you away from that. If you're getting something from it, by all means, get something from it. But learn to open your eyes too and go, wow, yeah, I see that. When people come to you and say, well, this teacher said that it's beyond Course in Miracles because the Course is old, just, it's up to you whether you want to reveal that to them or not and say, really, well, it's up to you. If they're growing from that other, if they're actually becoming better people from it, I would think twice about shooting them down on that. But it's you have to discern what feels right for you. Okay? And on that note, Edgar Cayce, fantastic stuff, man. Cayce, his accuracy, his clarity, beautiful stuff. But one time, and I've told this story before in a couple of classes, but there was a time when there was a popular channel from Europe. And Cayce was obviously a channel of sorts, but in America. But there was this very popular channel. And Cayce had come in just at the ending of what we called mediumship. Europe had the mediumship, seances and all that. Today, what we call channels, But they had mediums in those days, much more so. And Cayce's coming out, and he's not really doing the medium kind of a thing. It's not spirits per se. He's channeling instead the Akashic records. So he's tapping into the consciousness of all mankind, different than a deceased being. And so it's much clearer, much more beautiful, and much more effective and useful, I think. So there were these people that went to this medium, and they said, did you hear about this Edgar Cayce? And he's amazing, and the beings channeling, we have heard of Edgar Cayce, and and he's okay, but we could help him if he comes and lets us channel through him, these beings. And so they went to Cayce. Hey, Cayce, guess what? Everybody knows this channel. They're so popular. The beings that come through them want to come through you. Cayce's like, well, I don't know, trying to keep an open mind. All this stuff's a little weird to me because he didn't know about any of it consciously. So he says, okay, so they went into a trance, and he said, what should we do? And the answer inside, the voice that spoke through, not needed. You're doing fine. Okay, let it go. He lets it go. Send the message back to the channel in Europe. And, hey, Cayce said no. And the beings try again. Well, he needs to understand. We can raise his level of channeling and so on and so on. His information if he lets us come through. They go back to Cayce second time. And I'm not sure if it was just 2 or maybe even 3 times. They went back to him. You really need to consider this, Cayce. They're telling him when he's in trance. You really need to consider this because they said that they'll let these other spirits can come through you and it can raise your level of channeling. Finally, Cayce, the voice coming through him, which is Christ consciousness in a sense coming through him, says, do those beings know better than the God that created them? And what that meant, that was like a holy diss. It was so cool. It was like, wait a minute. You think we need to open up to you. Who are you? You're just deceased spirits that act like you know something. You know a little this, you don't know a little that, and you come through people and it's impressive to some people. This is a clearer channel, and we don't need you. We're doing fine. Don't impose your stuff on us, just like we should say to people, just like you should say to spirits that oppress you. Back off. Not interested. I'm all about the light of God. And that's a really cool level of discernment. Okay? Then, discernment. How does Jesus compare to other teachers? Because Jesus isn't a teacher. He's the Christ. Everybody else is a teacher. Muhammad, Buddha, they were all teachers, and we know this. I'm not trying to fight or compare anything. It's very simple. All the teachers taught their regions, their people, their cultures, their races, etc. Jesus actually is known in the Bible and lost books of the Bible. We can discern that he went to all cultures. He went to the Americas. The Native Americans talk about this in their legends. He went to India. He went to Europe. Here and there, everywhere. So again, be careful. Understand that when I'm talking about Jesus or Christ, I'm not like praising like some fundamental Christian. I'm just going with the truth. You can't argue, dispute the fact that there is an alignment. There's a higher consciousness than most, So you go with that. You go with this. This is the highest. Why would I want to settle for anything less? Now, mind you, I quote all the various teachers, Moses, Buddha, etc. But I still choose to let the greatest priority be Christ itself as a consciousness. I'm happy that Jesus, reached that level, and that becomes a great model. Jesus reached that level. But my job is to also reach that level. So I use Jesus as an example because he is a human that reached that. But it's Christ in Jesus that's the more important piece, not to Jesus himself. Okay? So hopefully that answers that. And I've done talks on some of these, specific talks on each of these. There's one I've done, Jesus and Buddha. So you can look that up on YouTube. and or some of my videos that are sold on my website. But the YouTube things are all free. So go to either one and see where I've talked about Jesus and or Buddha. Okay? Then, was Jesus married? I talked about that in a specific talk on just that. But was he married? I could say you need to discern that. Why does it matter? Is it important to you? So if you could imagine him being married and you could imagine what kind of a person he would be in partnership, try to be more like that. That would be a useful thing. To get caught up in belittling him and making him married to make him more human instead of less divine isn't really going to help us. So I would steer away from that. But I have done a talk on that, so go look that up. How do you know when to trust someone? And again, I'm having to be somewhat brief because there's lots of questions, but don't trust anyone. That is to say, don't trust anyone's ego. When you say, how do you trust someone? What you really, most of you would be meaning when you ask that is there anyone I can trust to be my partner? Is there anyone I can trust that won't lie to me? You're coming from a fearful or defensive place. And you don't even need to ask. Let's just nip it in the bud. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust their ego. You see? Don't trust their ego. But trust only one thing, and that is that deep inside everyone has a spark of divinity. That's what you can trust. Meaning, I can trust that even when you act like a jerk, I'm trusting that there's a light in you and I release you to find that light. But my answer is no, about whatever you're wanting me to do. You want me to lend you money and I know you're a flaming addict and that you usually use money for your addiction. The answer is no. Oh, you don't trust me. Actually, I don't. Not the addict. But I trust that part of you is made in God's image. When you find that part, I'll lend you some money. You see? But it's when they find and access and integrate and live that part. Do we really need to forgive people even if they're harmful, such as family, it says? Yes, you have to forgive everyone, but you don't have to move in with them. You don't have to lend them money. You don't have to do anything. Love and forgive them, but you can still say goodbye. See, again, underneath this all is discernment, meaning what feels right. I'm going to love and forgive you. But what if you were sickly abusive to someone in the family or to me or whatever? I'm still going to love and forgive. I'm loving and forgiving who you really are. I'm loving and forgiving so I can see the real you. The one that is ego-based, there's nothing to love and forgive. That's not the real you. It's the false you. So I'm going to say no to it. I'm not going to enable it. I'm not going to kiss its feet. I'm not going to say, why don't you just abuse us some more? No. The answer is no to the abuser, and yet love and forgiveness. Love and forgiveness. It's similar to the last statement, which is, I'm going to trust the real you. I'm going to love and forgive that you and I both experience the false you. That's what I'm going to love and forgive. But I'm going to affirm finding the real you. Should we allow astrology to affect us? Astrology does affect us, but it's affecting us as a reflection of what's already happening in us. A full moon doesn't happen to you. It reflects that you are having an inner full moon experience. Full moon example, just Mercury retrograde example, is saying that we collectively are affected by the full moon, Mercury, etc. But those effects are already, they're actually, you could say they're triggering things that are already in us, but they're really even more accurately reflecting things. So we collectively, every so often, get in a certain mood. The moon just reflects it. It's hard to believe for some people, but that's what's happening. So Mercury isn't doing something to you, but it's reflecting our need to go back over things. Reconsider contracts, communications, agreements, or whatever, to reconsider some of these things. But it's us that needs to do it. The Mercury, the planet isn't forcing us. It's just, reflecting it back. Hey, you might have missed something. Oh, that's right. But who is it that's talking? My soul, it's Mercury within my soul that's reflecting that to me. Okay? Is it okay to use hallucinogenics? Well, of course, you do them. So how can it not be okay? You can do it. Any form of hallucinogenics. I don't care if it's beer calming you down or hallucinogenics that actually alter your mind and you start to see things. Someone was asking in a session recently about it just a day or two ago. And it's, they thought, well, I know you probably don't approve of that. I don't have any disapproval or approval of hallucinogenics. You do what you do. But how could you convince me that I would need that to know higher things? I don't need it. And to think I do need it is actually a dysfunctional thought. That means I'm totally unplugged and disempowered from the truth of God. I don't need anything. So centering God, that's the truth. The hallucinogenics, I know for some people, here's one of the values, that maybe the only value of them is that they show you that there is something else. If you go to them to get the something else, you're off, because it can't give you God. It can only make you realize there are things other than your linear thinking of life. So you go, wow, there's more. Yes, there is. And you then could say, and more ultimately is God, and I want to get in touch with God. Great. And now you won't need those other things anymore. How can we choose the best teachers, authors, and so forth to study? I kind of covered that already, but I would say find one that's consistent. Find one also that teaches at the highest level. I think it's fine if you're going to mechanic school, that the guy doesn't have to be all Christy, and part the engine, through magic, like the Red Sea of Moses. Let them teach at the level that they teach at. There's nothing wrong with if that's what you need to learn. If you need to learn foot reflexology, you don't need to have a Christed being. Get a foot reflexology teacher. It's great. Healing arts, mechanical skills, whatever it happens to be, it's fine. But don't think that is all. Just like the hallucinogenics, a more mundane teacher, a hallucinogenic, they're things that can show you something in that moment. But when you say, how can you choose the right teacher? The right would be whatever you're needing in the moment. But if you're asking the highest teacher teaching, go for something that's consistent and go for something that introduces you as closely as possible to God. So therefore their teachings should be somewhat applicable. They should be, sounding right for your heart, consistent, and consistent to other teachings that have been right. If somebody comes out, and says, oh, it's all completely wrong. Oh, Course in Miracles doesn't get it. Edgar Cayce, that's old stuff, man. He doesn't get it. It's okay for me to say, I'd like to add. You see me quoting Cayce and Socrates and anybody else. But you don't see me saying they're passé. They're nothing. They're lower. They are great for what they're doing, So that's about it. That's about it there. When I sometimes, and I do my best to be really loving and patient with all teachings, but you'll hear me sometimes make fun of some things like religions and so on. But I've also, if you hear me all the way, you'll hear me credit them for teaching people that are at that level. I don't really believe that there's something permanently wrong with them and completely wrong with them. But I will sometimes make fun of the things that go on, the control and the games and the, all those kinds of things, because that's my way of discerning, to say, here's where it's kind of cool, kind of right, and here's where things go off a little bit, whatever that subject may be. All right. So I'm going to close with the question came up: tools for discerning. So let me just, cover these briefly. The first thing to ask yourself when you hear something, learn something: does it resonate with your heart? Just does it resonate with you? Don't say it's wrong if it doesn't resonate. It's just not right for you. So does it resonate? Kind of breathe into that and sort of adding to that, sort of off of that first line, does it resonate? Does it feel loving? Because as far as I'm concerned, if it doesn't have a loving vibe, I'm going to question it. Now that gets tricky because there are times like Jesus running the money changers out of the temple doesn't sound real loving. So you go, that must not have been right. No. That's just hard for us to understand, that you can be loving and kick ass at the same time. You can say to somebody, back off, and it come from love. But you can't say, listen, if it's not too much trouble, could I get you to just back off slightly? Some people would not get back off from that, and they won't back off. So you have to speak more firmly. So it gets a little tricky, but generally speaking, loving. It should feel loving. Course in Miracles sometimes. Edgar Cayce, Michael Mirdad, some teachers' teachings, they sound boom, like 2x4, to the forehead. But if you listen underneath it, you'll still hear and feel a sense of love. And that's a good thing. But also remember, is it, whatever you're asking about, studying, questioning, is it congruent with other things that you know, really feel strongly know that, it to have been true? So before I can discern anything, and all this is not about judgment, before I can discern whether I'm going to resonate with something or not, here's my center. These things are over here and some are in here and so on, spattered about, teachings, books, whatever. Here's my center. If things are spattered about, I only need to be looking at the ones that happen to have fallen in right in this column of me, my consciousness. Now, what do I want my consciousness to be? Michael? And what's Michael interested in? Mechanics or logic or psychology or whatever topic. See, if I don't know who I am, I won't know what things resonate with me. So I surrender my little self to the I am of God. And that's what I want to learn right here. It's what I choose to learn right here. Love, God, peace. Now, when things spatter about books, teachings, teachers, videos, presentations on TV, whatever. Wow, I'm right here. Even people in my life. Hey, are you in here? Because if you're not, no biggie. Love you. See ya, but love you. If you're in here, wow, nice. Very, very cool. And that's discernment, the ultimate discernment. Who am I and what am I about? I'm not saying you have to be into the I am of God, but whatever you are into, know it, and it'll help you discern whether something's right for you. If you are low self-worth and, no goal of higher integrity, there's a lot of things that would resonate with you. Maybe not even God now. Not because God doesn't resonate with you, but you're not resonating. You're not. So it's like you don't want to hear that stuff. So people that you sometimes argue with about love and God and not killing animals and whatever, they don't get you sometimes because maybe you're here and they're in their version. Now, if you go over to them, they're spattering their dot. You go over to them and they have their center, and their center is, I don't care. I don't really care. I don't believe in any of that. Animals don't have feelings, and neither do Republicans. That might be their thought system. So they or Democrats or whatever they're into. That's their way of being true to themselves. But really, what's sad is they usually don't even know that there's a themselves. They don't know that there's an identity. So they're really haphazard about consciousness, about living. And that's why so many things seem to be okay with them. Not really okay, but why they just go with it. And day to day, they just go through life like it doesn't matter. Because there's no discernment. There's no center to discern from. So they just go with. But what they don't realize, even when you don't know you're thinking, choosing, you are. You never have idle thoughts, A Course in Miracles tells us. You're always investing in consciousness somewhere along the line. So I'm going to find my center, and it's in God. Why settle for anything less? Don't settle for even a teacher to be your thing. Let it be God. And let the teacher fit into that column with you and be a teacher to you in your column, but it's your column. It's you and God. The teacher could pass away, but their teachings could remain because it still resonates. If it ever doesn't resonate, like let's say you were into a certain teaching and you kind of went even further into something, you'll know if you did it right if you still honor and respect the one that no longer is your primary thing. But guess what? If that's true, it'll still be in your column as a thing you love and respect and appreciate. When it seems to have faded over here, or even your love and respect for people, I used to love so-and-so, but now I don't like them because of what they did. Now they've segmented from here to here, but they were never really in a state of love with you. They were when your center was dysfunctional, they suited you fine. You changed your alignment, now they don't fit. It's all about, vibration and resonance, yes, that's true, but it's consciousness. So, who are you? What are you about? Make yourself about God. Don't settle. Make yourself about God. That's pretty cool. Then you say, if things don't resonate with God or bring me closer to God, they're not that important to me. There you go. What kind of diet do you have? Well, let me check in. This is kind of where I'm at. You don't agree? That's okay, because you're over here anyway, because you're in a different vibe zone. This works for me. And so on and so on. You need, discernment. You have to have a center to discern from. If you've got no center of who you are, you've got no true discernment. Okay? I pray that's made sense, and that the answers to these can, bring some peace to some of you who have written these kinds of questions. And I know some of you have probably hoped for a full hour on each topic separately as videos. Can't get to them all for a full hour. But I did an hour or so on the variety of them, and some of them are splintered off into their own talks. So check them out if you can. All right? Thanks.